Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. This month we've been on a different sort of journey. Instead of walking through Exodus verse by verse, I've been taking you to other places. I brought you to the city of David and showed you what I got to see when I went to Israel last month. I brought you to the ancient site of Shiloh, where we saw some recent excavations. I talked to you about a particular case study on the relationship of Christians to Old Testament law, and we considered whether it's okay for a Christian to get a tattoo. And then I showed you my own tattoo, and we talked about the significance of its meaning to me. Now, this has been a fun exploration of topics outside Exodus, and I've enjoyed engaging with you. I've enjoyed your excitement about this. This has also opened me up to some significant criticism. I received some criticism about my enthusiasm for these particular archaeological excavations, and I learned about the way that archaeological excavations are embroiled in political conflicts over who has the right to the land. And people have been displaced in the process of digging in some of these places, and that's been really contentious. Some have been critical of my level of excitement over getting to see the places that I saw. So I just want to reiterate that I'm not an archaeologist, and I don't have the tools to evaluate what exactly I'm looking at. I was relying on the expertise of those who showed us the sites, who were the excavators themselves, the archaeologists on site who spoke with us, who have their own theories. And these theories have not yet gone through the peer review process to be thoroughly vetted by other archaeologists. And so I want to reemphasize that these findings are tentative, they are possible, they are tantalizing, and the jury's still out on what everything means. I also got some pushback this week on my tattoo. On Twitter, I got some very strong pushback from some Jews who saw my tattoo of the divine name and were very offended by it. I just wanted to reiterate that I meant no disrespect by getting this tattoo, and that I did not enter into it lightly, and that it's something that's deeply meaningful to me personally and the result of many, many years of study of the scriptures. That's what led me to get the tattoo. So, all this to say that when we open ourselves up to do public theology, when I take the public along with me as I discover things, as I think things through, there is bound to be pushback, and there are bound to be people who disagree with my conclusions, and that's okay. That's one of the risks of doing theology in public. I have not had very many people that I could turn to learn from in the area of public theology. There aren't a lot of scholars who have YouTube channels and who are talking to the public on a regular basis. And so I just wanted to take today to give a special tribute to one friend of mine who has been a mentor in this regard, and that is Michael Heiser. I first met Mike at the regional meeting of the Evangelical Theological Society back in 2015. I was presenting a paper on the difference between the image of God, being the image of God, and bearing God's name, which, if you know my work, will not come as any surprise. And at the end of my paper, a man in the back raised his hand and started asking great questions and giving really great feedback and insights. It was clear that he had studied these concepts for a long time, and that he knew the same people that I knew, the same scholars, and was familiar with their work. And I was just really impressed with his engagement, but I didn't know who it was. And so after it was all over, I turned to a friend and said, "Who was that asking those great questions and making those great comments?" And my friend got a grin on his face and said, "Oh, that's Michael Heiser." And I said, "Who's Michael Heiser?" And he laughed and said, "Just Google him." So I did. When I got home, I Googled Michael Heiser and found a whole wealth of information about this man who had been doing public theology for a long time already. He has several websites, he'd written a number of books, and he had a podcast, and he was making his scholarship accessible to lay people, to non-scholars. So that was 2015. In 2016, Mike emailed me and invited me to be on his podcast, the Naked Bible Podcast. I had never been on a podcast before. I even could admit I had never listened to a podcast before. I wasn't quite sure what it was. So he told me about it. I looked it up online and I thought, okay, I see. It's sort of like an audio sermon or an audio lecture that people can listen to. I wonder if anyone actually listens to these things. And as you know, since 2016, podcasts have exploded, and there are now so many, thanks in part to the pandemic. But in 2016, I interviewed with Mike at the National Evangelical Theological Society meetings. We did a short interview on what it means to bear God's name. And then when he released it, our conversation was released on the same episode as his conversation with N.T. Wright, which meant that a lot more people listened to it than probably they would have otherwise, because nobody in the world knew who Carmen Imes was besides my parents. Then fast forward to 2019, I was getting ready to release my book, Bearing God's Name, that I wrote, where I took what I learned in my dissertation and I repackaged it and re-explored it for non-scholars. And it was just about to come out, and Mike invited me to come up on stage at the Naked Bible Conference and present to 300 really eager audience members alongside some great scholars like Tim Mackey and David Burnett and others. It was a huge honor, and I had an absolute blast meeting these friends of Mike's, people who had benefited so much from his scholarship, who traveled long distances in some cases to be at this conference. And in fact, some of the people that I met at that conference are still friends of mine today. That was right before my book came out, probably like 2 months before the book came out. And then he had me on the podcast again to talk about the book the week that it came out, early December 2019. As you know, end of 2019 was a difficult time to release a book because within 3 months, the entire world shut down and all the events were canceled. And so when I look back on the success of my book and the way that I've been able to engage with people all over the world, I attribute that in large part to Michael Heiser. Him having me at his conference and then on his podcast opened up a whole audience of readers and people to engage with. And they are people that I have continued to learn so much from and enjoy interacting with in the years since. Mike has been a wonderful model for engaging the public with his research. Many who get a PhD end up in academia, and they do good academic work, and they talk to other scholars, and they train scholars, and their voices never get heard outside the academy. Not Mike. He's somebody who, from the beginning, has been passionate about bringing scholarship to the masses. And I'm so impressed with his ability to do this and with his passion to do this. And I share the same passion. I often think of my vision or my vocation as a bridge builder, trying to build a bridge between the academy and the church so that there's traffic both directions across that bridge. And I'm just so grateful for Mike's leadership and his example in that regard. Last Saturday, I was devastated to hear the news that Mike is in the final stages of a battle against pancreatic cancer. He shared online that he's gone home now from the hospital, he's on hospice, and doctors don't expect him to last more than a couple more days or weeks. It's been a long, hard fight, and I had really hoped that Mike would be able to pull through and that we would have many, many more years of learning from him and from his scholarship. And it's just been so devastating to hear that we're losing him. There are conversations he and I haven't had that I really wish we could have had. One of the last posts I saw from him was in December. He posted a picture of my book, which came out in advance reader copy, was sent to him. The book itself is not out yet, but he got an advance reader copy and he posted a picture of it by his Christmas tree, saying how much he couldn't wait to dive in. We had looked forward to having a conversation about being God's image on his podcast. Mike, I'm going to miss you. We're all going to miss you. We're going to miss your scholarship. We're going to miss learning from you. We're going to miss your gracious invitations to gather around the table and learn from each other. I have benefited so much, not only from your work, but from the way that you've done your work and the way that you've engaged widely. And I've benefited so much from those you've introduced me to who were fans of yours, who then read my book and became friends of mine. And so I just want to thank you for your work and for the godly example that you've set. The world is not going to be the same without you. And so as you go on ahead, just know that we will continue to be learning from you and from each other as we read the books that you're leaving behind, and the videos and lectures and podcasts and articles that you've left for us to continue to read and learn from. I'm so grateful for that legacy, and I'm so grateful for your friendship. You will be sorely missed.